For more than a century, four concrete dams blocked the Klamath River in northern California. The river once carried the third largest salmon run on the entire west coast of the United States. Chinook salmon, coho salmon, steelhead trout, and Pacific lamprey migrated hundreds of miles upstream every year to spawn in cold mountain tributaries that stretched deep into southern Oregon. Before the dams existed, the Klamath supported annual runs estimated at more than 1 million fish. The Klamath was not just a river. It was the economic and spiritual center of the Yurok tribe, the largest federally recognized tribe in California. For thousands of years, Yurok fishermen pulled salmon from the water using hand-woven nets passed down through generations. The fish fed entire communities. They sustained ceremonies. Chief Judge Abby Abinanti called the river the bloodline of her people. When the river died, the culture built around it began to fracture. Then the concrete went up. The first dam, Copco 1, was completed in 1918 to generate hydroelectric power. 3 more followed over the next 4 decades. Copco 2, Iron Gate, J.C. Boyle. Together they sealed off more than 400 miles of spawning habitat upstream. Water that once flowed cold and fast through mountain canyons pooled into warm, stagnant reservoirs. Toxic blue-green algae bloomed every summer in the slack water, choking the oxygen out of the river and killing juvenile fish by the millions before they could reach the ocean. By the early 2000s, the Klamath salmon population had collapsed to less than 5% of its historical size. In 2002, a catastrophic fish kill made national news. More than 34,000 adult Chinook salmon died in a single event near the town of Klamath, their bodies rotting along miles of riverbank. The stench reached communities miles away. Television cameras filmed Yurok elders weeping on the shore. Federal biologists classified the coho salmon in the Klamath as threatened under the Endangered Species Act and warned that without drastic intervention, the species would go extinct within a generation. The fight to remove the dams consumed more than 20 years of negotiations, lawsuits, environmental impact reviews, and political battles involving tribal nations, state governments, federal agencies, and the energy industry. Pacify Corp., the utility company that owned all 4 dams, initially resisted. But engineering studies showed that retrofitting the aging structures with modern fish ladders and environmental controls would cost more than tearing them down entirely. In 2010, Pacificorp agreed in principle. In 2023, demolition crews finally began dynamiting the first structure. Copco 2 came down first, sending plumes of dust and rubble into the canyon. Iron Gate followed within months. Then Copco 1, then J.C. Boyle, the most upstream barrier. By October 2024, all 4 dams were gone. It was the largest dam removal project in the history of the United States. $450 million of concrete, steel, and earth erased from the landscape in less than 2 years. The speed of what happened next stunned even the scientists who had spent entire careers studying the river. Within 10 days of the final barrier coming down, Chinook salmon were spotted swimming upstream through stretches of river they had not reached in over a century. Biologists from the Yurok Tribal Fisheries Program tracked the fish using underwater cameras and sonar equipment mounted on bridges along the newly opened corridor. The salmon navigated freshly exposed rapids that no living fish had ever encountered. They swam over gravel bars that had been buried under reservoir sediment for decades. They pushed deep into tributaries in southern Oregon that had been completely cut off from migratory fish since 1918. No one released them from a hatchery truck. No one guided them upstream. The fish followed the current on instinct alone. The same instinct that had driven their ancestors upstream for thousands of years before the first dam was ever poured. The river itself was transforming around them. Sediment that had been trapped behind the dams for 100 years flushed downstream in massive brown plumes visible from the air. The initial release looked catastrophic to anyone watching from the banks. Murky water choked the lower river for weeks. Property owners downstream worried about damage to their land. But as the sediment cleared over the following months, something remarkable appeared underneath. The original riverbed, buried for over a century, re-emerged intact. Gravel bars formed naturally in the current, creating the spawning substrate that salmon need to reproduce. Side channels opened up where the river had been forced into a single narrow track by the dam infrastructure. The Klamath began to braid and meander the way it had before the dams existed, carving new paths through the exposed canyon floor without any human engineering or guidance. By spring 2025, vegetation was already colonizing the former reservoir beds. Willows and sedges sprouted on mudflats that had been submerged under stagnant water for 100 years. Biologists documented juvenile salmon in stretches where no fish had been recorded in any living scientist's career. Water temperatures in the lower Klamath dropped measurably as the warm reservoirs disappeared, creating conditions that favor cold-water fish survival during the critical summer months when heat stress kills the most vulnerable populations. The Yurok tribe held a ceremony on the riverbank the day the last dam fell. Elders who had spent their entire lives watching the river die stood in the shallows as salmon swam past their feet for the first time in generations. The tribal council released a statement calling it the most significant environmental restoration event in the history of the American West. Children who had never seen a wild salmon run watched the fish push upstream through water that was flowing freely for the first time in their lifetimes. Scientists estimate that the restored spawning habitat could eventually support runs of more than 1 million salmon per year, returning the Klamath to something approaching its pre-dam productivity. Full recovery will not happen overnight. Decades of degraded water quality, lost habitat complexity, and reduced genetic diversity in the surviving salmon populations mean that complete restoration could take 20 to 50 years of patient monitoring and management. But the river is flowing. Salmon are swimming where their ancestors swam. And the fastest ecological response that anyone predicted is already underway, driven by nothing more complicated than the removal of 4 walls of concrete and the return of gravity to a river that never stopped trying to reach the sea.